So again, thank you all for coming out today for this important community conversation. We are going to do a brief introduction. Chief Jerry Saulters started his law enforcement career with Athens-Clarke County Police Department in 1998. And prior to law enforcement, he served in the United States Army. He is a graduate of the Southern Police Institute, Administrative Officers course at the University of Louisville. And you know what? We are going to post these bios. We're going to send them out to you all because we really need to get down to the questions. That's what we're here for. So at this time, I think I'm just going to turn it over to you. If you could get us started.
Sure.
Chief Saulters, since I started, please forgive me for cutting it short, but This is an important conversation, so thank you.
A lot more important than the bio. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here and coming out on this cold February day to talk about something that's really affecting our community and really the entire country, and that's the issues with the new laws, federal laws, and also state laws as it relates to House Bill 1105. So for the Athens-Clarke County Police Department, we are certified in the state of Georgia to enforce the laws and also local ordinances within Athens-Clarke County. We don't enforce federal laws, and historically we have not, as an agency, worked with immigration. What would happen years and years ago, and for years, is immigration would call us and they would tell us they would be in a certain area conducting an operation looking for a certain person with warrants. That didn't affect us. They never asked for us to come out and assist them. And then when they were done, they would call back into Central and basically say, we're done. And I can tell you right now, I don't think that's happening. I don't think we're getting notified anymore. The last time we were notified that ICE was in our community operating was in April of last year. So that's kind of where we're at now, and I've seen some articles. I don't know it to be factual, but in other communities where ICE is operating, that the local agencies are not being contacted, that they're coming in and conducting their operations without local law enforcement. So that's kind of where we're at. Looking forward to all the questions today and getting to know y'all and kind of talk through kind of what we're doing as an agency. With that, I'll turn it over to Sheriff.
Good afternoon again. I'm pretty much going to echo some of what Chief Saulters just said. There's been some changes in the law, and I think the biggest thing here is to get to the questions so we can get y'all some facts and answers. And I think that's why it's important that we're here and to show that we're, one, on the same page, but two, get the actual truth out there, because there's a lot of rumors. We've heard things. What I do want to say is there are some changes to the laws, but there's also some people who would enact to just put fear out there. So some of the things that you hear might actually be written somewhere, but that doesn't mean they're actually happening. I just want you to always be willing to look at it through that lens. Sometimes people exert their power by putting some of these rumors out there, and hopefully we can put some of those to bed and just kind of get to what the truth is and how it affects Athens-Clarke County specifically.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Okay, so let me just explain what is going to happen. ICPGA did a survey, put it out in the community, and asked people to submit questions before today. We took the top 3 questions that were pretty much everyone's questions, and we put them on these slides. So we will answer these first 3 questions. They'll have a few minutes to answer, and then we'll take questions immediately from the audience. But real quick, before we go into that, I need to apologize to these gentlemen. They deserved a better introduction. I will just say that I've spent a lot of time with both of them over the past few years, and I can honestly say that, regardless of how you feel about anything these days, these are the 2 men that need to be leading in Athens-Clarke County today, and I'm personally so thankful to both of them for the character and the integrity that they have. And so I thank you both for being here. Okay. All right. Question number 1. In the face of ICE invasions, what can we as clergy members do to help our Hispanic community members cope and respond? What can we do to help you and our police and sheriff officers?
All right, since I got the mic, I guess I'll start off. I think the biggest thing, as I started talking about, is trying to dispel rumors and innuendo. When you do your research, when you talk to the people who know and you're armed with facts, that helps. There's going to be some fear-mongering. There's going to be some things that are out there that are both true and non-true, and we just need to be able to parse through that information. So I think as clergy members, it's important that we don't give in to a lot of the things. Who here, by show of hands, thinks that everything you see on Facebook is true? Let's not go that route. Let's actually ask questions. I think the biggest thing is let's not give into the hatred and fear. Let's ask questions. And you can ask me any question. There's a lot of things I can tell you over the especially this last year, that have been very trying. But if people had actually just asked what the truth is, what facts are, we could have had a lot less consternation, a lot less vitriol in our community. So I think that's the biggest thing. And as clergy, as citizens, I think that's the way we need to go. Again, a room full of folks, faith-based folks. So I would hope that, you're going to have whatever it is, Christian, Baptist, whatever beliefs. I think that's what we need to hang on, but we can't give in to what is floating around on the internet. I don't know how much time I got, but I'm going to pass it on to Chief, and if we need some follow-up, we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with the sheriff. What I'd also say is important to connect with immigrant rights and other social justice groups in the area to explore ways to support immigrants at the local level and look at things. Beto's is here. There's other opportunities. I would also say legally, what are immigrants' rights? I think that's important to know that, but I would also echo what the sheriff said, is putting out good information. I'm hearing, hey, there's a bus over here grabbing people, and I called the sheriff, and the sheriff's like, nobody's in my jail. I haven't heard anything. And so while we're hearing these rumors, these are not happening. These are not factual, and I'm waiting for some kind of report. And I know, unfortunately, in the Clarke County School District put something out that some parents are not letting their kids go to school because they're scared, and rightfully so. But these things are not happening. So we as a community and as a group, especially through ICPGA, should be making sure that we're messaging correctly to say, here's the facts and here's not, or when you hear rumors, kind of dispel that. But I think really working with groups and things of that nature, and also make sure you're legal. If you're going to drive your car, make sure your tail lights are working, don't speed, don't run stop signs, don't do anything to draw attention to yourself. Would be another message I think we would put out.
Thank you, John. Question number 2. Given recent policy changes like the Lakin-Riley Act, how is your office working with ICE and the Department of Homeland Security? And what would you want us to let our immigrant neighbors know about this?
What we have to start off with, particularly as a sheriff and just law enforcement in general, we're sworn to protect and uphold the law. So if there's a law in place, we have to follow the law, first and foremost. People use the term discretion. Sometimes there is no discretion. Some laws are truly black and white as they're written. Any chance that we have, we focus on protecting and serving the community. So regardless of all these other things, immigration, all the hubbub that comes up about that, we are concerned, but our primary concern, regardless of your nationality, race, gender, any of those things, is serving and protecting people. And then property comes second, but all those things go hand in hand. So I would say that what we're doing is following the law. That's number one. But two, anywhere that we can err on the side of just humanity, that's what we do. If we do have that discretion, that's what we do. And it's in every community, I think, that we have to focus on. It's not just about the immigration issue. We have to be focused on anybody. It doesn't matter where you're from. Last I checked, the Constitution applies as a land of the law. It's not a land of where you were born. So if you're here in America, I'm going to treat you like an American. If you commit crimes, then those things will be addressed. We have to, as law enforcement, if there is a crime committed, we do have to address that. If I don't, I won't have a job. So that's the standpoint that we come from. And I guess in a nutshell, that's it. I know it's not a specific answer, but what I can tell you as far as how the law goes, we have to, if someone commits a crime and they're brought to jail, there are certain queries that we have to run. And Homeland Security is immediately notified whether we make a call or not. There's a computer system. As soon as we put them in, it goes through. Now the law has changed such that we don't have any type of discretion. There's no question about constitutionality. The law says that if ICE issues a detainer, that's the same thing that would have been a warrant in the past. So we don't have the discretion to say, hey, we think this person would get out. So that's kind of how the process is. We can go, I'm sure some more questions will come up. We'll go into further detail. But as my time is coming to a close, I just want to say again, the law is the law. And we got to start with that. It doesn't always end with that, but that's where it has to begin, each and every situation.
Sure. So what I'll start out with is what we did before, right? So as it relates to what's our policy now and what's different, is the way it was for the police department before is we didn't check someone's status. If we stopped someone, no matter where you're from, and we're addressing the violation, we didn't check illegal status. There was no way for us to do that. A lot of people say, well, why didn't you check if they were legal, not legal? We didn't have a way to do that. We query the driver's license or the name and date of birth through GCIC and NCIC, and if nothing comes back, then we would take our normal enforcement action. We didn't report to ICE of anything of that nature. But what happened is with the Georgia Criminal Alien Track and Report Act of 2024, it has placed additional responsibilities on law enforcement officers regarding the identification and fingerprinting of persons where probable cause exists to believe they've committed a crime. And so there's a couple things to that. One, we must attempt to establish whether or not the person is lawfully present within the United States when there's probable cause to suspect they have committed a crime, and that is including traffic offenses. That could be, driving without a license is a fingerprintable offense. So now by law, if we have that, we have to go through this process. And then also, you shall transport illegal aliens to the jail when ICE has issued a detainer for the individual. That is a must now that's on law enforcement. And the police department is required to annually certify that we are in compliance with the law. And if not, we are criminally liable under House Bill 1105 for willfully noncompliance for not doing that. So if we're not holding this log and if we're not taking folks to jail for certain fingerprintable offenses, then we're in violation of the law. So what we've done now is, so if we're on a traffic stop and a person is illegally in the country, we have to do what the government calls as an IAQ, an illegal alien query. And so we put this in our computer, and basically what happens is, what the law says is you must wait a reasonable amount of time. At the police department, we look at 20 minutes as a reasonable amount of time. So if we got somebody that ran a stop sign and they're here illegally, and we put their information we go through the IAQ, and we have to basically wait about 20 minutes. So if we hadn't got a response, we're releasing that person on citation. And then we have to report all that into our database saying we had contact with this person. And then later on, if ICE wants to come back, then they'll have more information on that. That's up to them. But that's kind of what's changed from what we used to do versus what the law requires us to do now.
This will be our third and final prepared or pre-question. Thanks, Tom. This will be our last question that we got from the survey. Then we will start taking questions from the audience. Question number 3, how will officers handle cases of driving without a license? From what I understand, it is up to the officer's discretion whether they arrest, fine, etc. the individual. I am hoping that officers will be advised not to arrest people when their only violation is a simple traffic issue, knowing that this can lead to family separation and unjust trauma for their children and their families. I know that we just hit on it, but if you could elaborate.
Sure, absolutely. So again, we're going from rumors for what we know. What I am hearing and what I understand is ICE at this point is only going after serious criminal offenses, people with criminal histories, things of that nature. That's what is being reported from ICE. I have no evidence to show anything else, and nor have I seen them come after someone for a DUI or other lesser charges. Now, that could change with this administration. We don't know what's going to happen, so it could change. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying they won't do it. They may do that. But at the same time, we have not seen that here. And at the end of the day, we have to follow the law. We have to put in the IAQ information. And if it is a fingerprintable offense, to include shoplifting, where sometimes before we would just release on a citation, we no longer have that authority to do that. Now we must take them to the jail and book them into the jail. And once we do that, we do this right here and pass it over to the sheriff for comment.
And that's important because that Passover, it's funny in this setting, but it's also important to remember that this is a team effort. There's no just like one thing that's there and done. In some communities, you don't have that separation where you have a sheriff's office and a police department or another agency. So we work together and we communicate all the time. So as far as my folks, when it comes to things like that, the driving without a license, anything, normally that's not what we deal with. That's a lot more the police day-to-day functions. So I can tell you about the past as well. So I've been on patrol, and there are certain areas I patrolled that I knew there was a high population of people who might be undocumented, might be unlicensed, or whatever it is. And yes, we did have that discretion in the past. There was plenty of times that I got somebody and we stopped them. They ran a stop sign. They told me that, hey, I'm on the way to work. I don't have a license. This is the only way that I have to get back and forth. I got to take care of my family. And we were able to use that discretion and say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. These laws, House Bill 1105 in particular, is one of those that took that away. So anybody who we know is a certified citizen, so to speak, of this country, we can still have that discretion. But anybody who's, let's say, not even undocumented, but we can't prove, we don't have immediate knowledge that they are documented, then we have these additional steps that we have to go through, running those IAQ queries and taking them to our jail if that comes. So I guess what we can say is, I think Chief already said it. You got to make sure that your own nose is clean. That's how we started. Don't commit crimes. And again, I'm not saying that anybody commits crimes at any higher level, because I've been in America a long time. I've seen a lot of crimes. I've had crimes committed against me. I don't know that I've ever had any crime committed against me by somebody who was not born in America. Let that say what it means to you. But right now, in this day and age, what we have is a different world. And I can't live in the world that I want to live. I got to live in the world that we are in. So we do have to respond accordingly to that. Hopefully that's an answer.
It's an answer.
We'll move on. It might not be feel good, but it is an answer.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, at this time, we will take questions from the audience. Here, and then there. Hello, Reverend Clore.
Could you just reiterate the 20-minute thing when you bring the person in? So, say for example, you don't
If
know
you
the
could,
answer.
hold on just a minute.
Yeah.
So we amplify it for everybody to hear.
Okay, sorry. I just would question again, could you go over again the 20-minute time period so that you don't get anything back in 20 minutes, that whether they're documented or not, and then you let them go? Did you say that then ICE finds out, you have to notify them? Is that?
Yeah, so when we do the IAQ, that's contacting ICE.
Okay.
And so they're going to get that, and they may not respond. And what the law says is the police department must notify,
Right.
and then must hold that person for a reasonable amount of time.
Okay.
So what we consider as an agency, a reasonable amount of time is 20 minutes, no more. And that's the same thing. So if someone's a citizen here and they have a warrant, we give a reasonable amount of time for another agency. So they got warrants out of Elbert County. A reasonable amount of time is usually 20 minutes.
Okay.
So that's what we look at. So after that, then we move on from there.
Okay.
So let me add to that. The other thing, semantics, we're required to notify ICE/Homeland Security. It's not like we're necessarily picking up the phone saying, hey, ICE, we got that IAQ is something that goes through NCIC, so it's a statewide notification. It just happens to be Homeland Security as one of the agencies that gets those queries when they're put in. So it's not like we specifically say, hey, let's put this in and send it to ICE. They're part of that notification network, and that satisfies that requirement of law for us to notify them.
Where was, I think, who was second?
It was here, and then Reverend Clore in the back. Carrie.
Hi, I have a lot to say, so you guys cut me off if I talk too much.
We're just going to tell you right now if you can keep it to about 30 seconds.
My name's Carrie, and I actually wrote that third question that was coming from me, so I still have a question to follow up. You stated, Sheriff, that you would use discretion if you can certify that someone is a citizen. So I'm wondering, how do you do that besides racial profiling? If I'm stopped and I forget my license at home, I speak English, I'm white, I most likely am not going to get arrested, but somebody who maybe looks or speaks a different language will, and I'm wondering how you use that discretion
Can I answer that?
with citizens
Yeah,
when I don't
so-
carry my passport with me while I drive.
Okay, so Chief Saulters and his folks deal with that a lot more. Because you look directly at me, I'm gonna have to give you some kind of answer. My statement was from when I was on patrol. I said now they've taken away that discretion. So that discretion that I used was lateral. It wasn't about any particular look, feel, anything. If I was there, and if it was, if I stop a woman who's pregnant on the way to the hospital, it don't matter where she's coming from, and it's the emergency needs to drive, then I would have done that. Not from a profiling standpoint. If we stop somebody, we have to check and see if they're licensed. That's just what the law is.
So I will also be arrested if I'm driving without a license, for sure.
No.
You could be. That's the law. But let me let Chief go, and if you want more from me, I'll follow up after that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you have to provide a state identification. It could be from California, it could be from wherever. As long as we have a state ID that you went through the process, then that's how that's run. And so if I stop someone who is Hispanic and has a strong accent and they have a license, we're not running the IAQ on them. And if you don't have your license with you, you'll provide a name and date of birth. We'll be able to put that information in our computer. It'll show a picture of you. We can verify, so no, you would not be. There's two different charges. Driving without your license on persons is one charge, just a ticket. When you're not licensed is a different charge. So that's kind of the difference there. So what we're trying to do is verify, because the law now requires us to verify. So state IDs verify in certain states. And so that's kind of how that works there.
So I'm sorry if I'm still not.
No, you're fine.
Getting it, but so the person will only be taken into custody if they do not have a license on record, but the IEQ, is that what it's called? Will still
IAQ.
will still happen. That happens not once you get to the jail, that happens before.
So wait a minute. So no. So the IAQ would be on the traffic stop, and if we're going to take that person to jail, then once they get to the jail, then the sheriff has the same responsibility to just report it through NCIC, like you talked about a while ago, which is another IAQ, and then that person's able to bond out of that charge unless ICE puts a hold on them.
Okay. I obviously have no legal background at all, so.
Yeah, no, you're fine. And
I'm
listen.
trying to think what happens, like, if there's any discretion at all,
Sure.
if ICE is not going to know about this person until they are taken into custody, is there anything that the officer can do to avoid that step from happening at all?
Yeah, if they choose not to arrest, if they don't have probable cause. Now, with that in mind, just like HB 1105, we don't care the tone of your skin, white, black, anything. Normally, we used to be able to cite for shoplifting charge. It's a misdemeanor. We could cite and release and say you're promised to show up to court. Well, once this law changed, where now it says to include shoplifting, they must go to jail. Now, as an agency, I feel the best thing for us to do is not to say, oh, since they have an accent or they appear to be Hispanic, then they shoplift, I'm taking them to jail. Now in Athens-Clarke County, you shoplift, you go in jail, I don't care, white, black, purple, it don't matter, because we're going to be fair and consistent across the board.
Yeah, I mean, forget I said racial profiling,
Yep.
I'm just wondering.
No, I'm with you.
There's
But
a
we're
sense
doing
that-
things to ensure that that's not the case with us.
So we're gonna have to move to the next person and then we'll come back. I know you said you have a lot.
Yeah,
So we'll come back, so, but we have a lot of questions in the room. So who was?
Reverend Clore, oh, there he is.
Maybe the same question. I heard you say probable cause a couple of times, and so just wanted to clarify. You, if somebody is stopped, the IAQ is a part of checking the state ID, which would be my Georgia driver's license or something like that if you have one. That's gonna happen automatically, period. And then if somebody doesn't have a state ID that on their person or that you can track through the system, then what happens is there any discretion for the officer to do anything, or is it, and if so, what are criteria for that discretion? Do you have any written down, for example?
Yeah, so if an officer performs a traffic stop for a stop sign, let's just use that for a violation, and the person says, I don't have a license. We say, well, do you have a license anywhere else? And they say, no. All right, what's your name and date of birth? We're going to run that through our GCIC. It's going to confirm what they're telling us. And then we will ask them, are you here illegally? And if they say no, or they say yes, or can you provide some kind of document to us to satisfy that requirement, right? And then they say they're not here legally. They turn around, the officer then has to do the IAQ, reasonable amount of time, the 20 minutes is there, and the officer can still just cite that person on a stop sign violation and let them go. If it's a fingerprintable offense, then the officer loses their discretion, if that makes sense, to include shoplifting. That's what House Bill 1105 did. It took that piece away for certain crimes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Who was next?
That's all that I had. I'm sorry?
I said it's too
Okay.
many, I can't manage the staff.
Okay, Greg, Reverend Sheets, and then,
I know Beto was right after Reverend Sheets, that's all I know.
okay, so Greg Davis is right over here, and then Reverend Sheets is right here with the white
And then
jacket.
Beto.
And then,
No, Beto was right
oh,
after Reverend.
baby, okay. And then
So
we'll
if
go to
we,
Tom.
so somebody else from now on has to help with the staff, because I see all these lovely faces and I can't choose.
Hi, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
My concern is with roadblocks. I know that roadblocks are publicized ahead of time, and I know there are good reasons to have them. What happens in a case of a roadblock? Someone is not breaking the law, they're just caught up in a line of traffic.
Sure.
So how would they be treated under the circumstances that people have given where they're not here legally?
So great question. Roadblocks are legal. We don't do roadblocks here unless we have a pattern of a certain thing. As everyone knows, we've had an increase in pedestrian fatalities and other fatalities as it relates to vehicles. So if we have a checkpoint, it's for a safety checkpoint, and that person would, if they would just get caught up in that and they didn't have a license, we would have to go through that normal process.
Very quickly. Sheriff, you do not have traffic ticket writing procedures, right? That's just left up to the chief of police department?
No, sir, that's incorrect. We can do anything that the police department can do.
But y'all don't do that in Clark County, right?
We do.
You do?
It's not as frequently, but yes. I wrote a ticket a few weeks ago myself.
Okay. Next thing, has either of your departments talked with defects about a situation that could possibly occur if you pull over someone who may be illegal, but they have children? The children could be illegal. Have you had an opportunity to speak with defects concerning how children be handled in these situations? Because right now, we're naturally talking about sending everybody back to wherever, you know.
And again, I guess that's one of those things that's worst case scenario. So I can say those discussions do happen, and we've been talking about it. But right now, it's mostly hypothetical. There are things in place, but this is what I'm going to tell you. Just like with my folks, we're 47 slots down. So we don't have enough deputies to do a lot of the things that we just need to do with the jail, with the courthouse, just security, serving warrants, all those things. We're very, very stretched thin. DFCS is very much the same. regardless of what it comes down to, at some point you get to a point you just don't have people who can perform the functions. You don't have enough folks. DFCS is in that situation as far as their workers, as far as the folks that they would have that could take on any of those children in those situations. And that's just the reality that we live in. So there's a lot of talk about how many people we're going to detain, how many people are going to be deported. But this is what I can tell you. There are not enough boots on the ground to do what this administration is saying they're going to do. Does it mean it won't get to that point? No. But right now is the time to have these discussions and work these things out, because if we do get to there, we absolutely do need to have some of those plans in place. So right now it would pretty much be just the same on a smaller scale. But in a mass situation, I don't think that there's enough spaces, enough faces, or enough places for us to really address this situation.
And what I would tell you, Reverend Sheets, we already have policies and procedures in place. So even if we deal with someone who's an American here in Georgia from Athens, we always, if we have to take somebody in custody and there's children involved, we have to call DFCS, but then DFCS and the police department work together to try to find a family member, friend, someone who can take the children and make sure that they're safe. That's always the number one process, or what we try to do first.
Thank you.
So, Beto Mendoza, I'm with Athens Human Rights Coalition, and I have a list like 20 questions. For the sake of not repeat misinformation, I want to clarify that is not just today. These laws have been here for 20 years. I mean, and I can name SB 529, HB 87, SB 5, 325, and the last one, 1105, etc. And they all have these names like Illegal Immigration Act, or Anti-Sanctuary, or etc. HB 87, we call it Show Me Your Papers. And I think it's more accurate. They stripped down one part, stop for police messing with those questions. But one of the things is that I'm almost the only one in this room that automatically people will ask, where are you from? And that is normal, because of my appearance. And that is racial bias. And I would like to know what is the racial bias training you have in place to stop this discrimination. But my real question, and I have very, very reasonable suspicions. An accusation is a reasonable suspicion. Let's say that someone, for their racial bias, accused me of stealing something. That is a reasonable suspicion to be interrogated about immigration status. Is any white person will be interrogated at the same time because a false accusation. That was the question. A reasonable suspicion is an accusation.
Yeah, so no. So there's probable cause for an arrest is what the law says. Let's start with your first question, though, as far as what training we receive. Every one of our officers in our department are trained in racial bias training, racial profiling training. We also, every month, our supervisors have to spot check the Axon videos, our body cams for our officers to ensure that there's not any kind of racial bias or anything going on there. And then not only is it every year, the state also mandates fair and impartial treatment training every single year for our officers, so they get it every year. The next part of your question, it's reasonable articulable suspicion is not a reason to arrest someone. That is not a reason to run their query. So if I get a complaint and two neighbors are, say they're having a little get together and somebody thinks they're fighting, and so they call the police. Well, the police, we will respond. And then we find out, no, they're just having a good time and was loud. Okay, so I don't have probable cause to arrest anyone, so therefore I'm not required to run that query. Okay, now, if one had punched somebody in the mouth and now I've got to make an arrest because that's probable cause, a police officer has reason to believe that a crime was committed, then and only then am I by law have to run that IAQ. It's not reasonable suspicion. So.
So let me just add real quickly to that. So I can speak for the training that's in. I'm a certified instructor in our bias training. I taught the police officers for several years before I became the sheriff. So more than a dozen years I've been teaching that bias-based training. And it's not about how to, it's about how not to. It's about how to recognize what your biases are and not make decisions based on that. So the police department absolutely does that training. They take it seriously, and the sheriff's office does. I'm one of the people who, will instruct for the area. I've taught some of those classes in the public. I've taught a couple times for AADM and for a few other folks. So if y'all want to see what it is that we teach. The police department has their Citizens Police Academy. We have our Sheriff's Academy. And if you just want to know what it is, if you let me know, I won't speak for the chief, but if there's enough community interest, I am certainly willing to put on the class to show exactly what it is we're teaching so the community can see firsthand.
And we invite the community to our training. So to come and see what we're doing and what we're teaching.
I know we all have a lot of questions. We're going to do the staff, and somebody's keeping an eye on the order. Thank you for your questions. So I hope you can write your questions down if we don't get to it today.
This for the sheriff has to do with detention. So just clarify for me, what has changed in the law is that if a person is detained and they have, if the person is confined, arrested, and they have an ICE detainer, you're required to hold them. And that's the first part of the question. The second part is, how long are you required to hold them? And if that detention goes on for an extended period of time, do we expect the federal government to start to pay the county on per diem for holding that person for a lengthy period of time? The second part of the question is, for a person who's detained in the jail, is there anything other than an ICE detainer that would prevent them from being able to bond out based on documentation status?
Okay, so that's a good question. Let me contrast just a little bit. So prior to House Bill 1105 and the Lake and Riley Act that we have right now, it was actually unconstitutional to hold somebody beyond the time that any citizen would be held. That was reflected in our jail policy. And the sheriff before me, it was based on advice from legal counsel that if somebody else would get out within 48 hours, then they would be, or if it was 24, they need to be held the same. Because again, as I said, the Constitution is the law of the land. It's not the law of where you were born. The bill changed such that sheriffs don't have a discretion anymore. It is a legal binding document when ICE sends that detainer now. So it's equivalent of a warrant. But even with that, because we're not holding them based on the crime, it's based on that detainer, we still have that 48 hours. If ICE says, hey, we got them, we're going to come get them, they have 48 hours. At the end of that 48 hours, if any citizen would have been released, we have to release that person as well. Otherwise, that goes into, the possibilities of litigation. The second part, I'm not sure. Can we get clarity on is there anything else that prevents somebody from being detained other than ICE detainer, or am I not understanding that right?
Does the Raleigh Act prevent somebody from getting a bond based on documentation status? So, in other words, if they have a detainer, clarify how the law changed their opportunity to get a bond and to actually bond out of the jail based on documentation status.
Okay, they could not bond until that ICE detainer time has expired.
You're talking about 48 hours?
Yes. All right.
Thank you.
That's why I wore it. My question is about the training that you were just talking about. What effect does the current administration's view of DEI training have on what you are offering your officers and sheriffs?
I would say that has absolutely none. Again, we're not federal agencies. He can dictate what he wants to federal agencies, and actually I think there's some judges that have blocked that up to this point right now. So I don't really even know at the federal level it's going to affect. This is what I can say. As long as I'm sheriff, then it's not going to affect us. We believe in diversity. We believe in training. I believe in Black History Month. Okay, it's going to stay and it's going to be honored. Hey, look, somebody told me the other day I was black. I didn't realize that. Look, I came dressed this way because I wanted to differentiate. I wanted to make sure that y'all know the difference between the sheriff and the chief. We look so much alike. But it's all going to be, it's policy, it's best practices. It's about how you treat human beings. It's not about the politics and all the jargon and stuff. I don't have hate in my heart. This is my church, my pastor sitting over here. So as long as I'm here, I'm going to be focused on doing the right thing.
And I'd agree, our training's not going to change. So we're going to continue to do what we do, care about people. So,
Jay, Jocelyn.
So I heard you say that you wouldn't arrest if there was a simple traffic offense. So let's just take a situation. Let's say somebody's driving and their plates are out of date.
And use your microphone, please. Yeah, just keep it close to your lips.
Is that better?
It is.
Yeah, much better.
All right, I'll go back. Somebody's pulled over because their plates are out of date. That's a simple traffic offense. You'd agree to that, right?
yes.
Once you pull them over, will you ask for their driver's license? And then if they don't have a driver's license on their person, will you then arrest them?
So the officer would, so again, driving without a license is a fingerprint offense, and the law says we have to transport them to the jail. So the answer is yes. We have to run the IAQ and then run it through. Now the officers could potentially, situation is they could make the decision that we're just going to cite for both, but they're still going to have to do that IAQ to notify the Homeland Security.
Clergy are really interested in specific words, so you all said the right things, although I wonder if you could rename it to anti-racial profiling rather than just racial profiling.
Thank you, Bobby.
I have a question about teenagers and delinquency offenses. So shoplifting used to be, a status offense for kids less than 17. Under the Lake and Riley Act, now it has to be arrested, or from what I'm understanding is there has to be detainment. How are you working with DJJ? And what are we doing with our 12 to 16-year-olds who are undocumented, who are shoplifting? And what does that look like?
Okay, so nothing changes there. So we don't arrest 12 to 16-year-olds. We cannot take them to jail. What we have to do is through the courts, we have to contact Department of Juvenile Justice.
And I guess I meant charged with, arrest.
Okay.
Because part of the Lake and Riley Act is if they are charged.
Sure.
And you can charge 13-year-olds, my understanding, with delinquency offenses or status offenses.
Absolutely. So we would make the charge. We would go through DJJ, our normal process. And in most of those cases, they're referred back to their parents, and they would be given to their parents unless it's a serious offense to place a hold, and that's DJJ's kind of decision to place a hold whether they go to a youth detention facility or not.
Okay. They're still being charged with the offense that under the Lake and Riley Act would be considered.
So it's not an offense under the Lake and Riley Act. The only thing that did says for certain offenses you'll take them to jail. That's going to apply to adults only. I don't see us dealing with juveniles in that way. And so it's when it's an adult. Because realistically, shoplifting for a juvenile is still just a juvenile delinquency issue.
So this is a delinquency issue.
Yeah.
That's
So,
not going to be under these new laws.
Also, what you got to consider is that I know we're kind of like splitting hairs or parsing a little bit, but these status offenses are not actually listed as crimes. They're called status offenses for a reason. So it doesn't even go in our system as that. Anybody under that age that couldn't be charged with anything, we wouldn't have. So now, if a 14-year-old commits murder, that's different, and it's going to fall under that. But I think just like the skipping school, things of that nature, those never go unless it rises to DJJ saying, hey, they're going to be detained. Even then, it's not criminal at that point. There's a difference.
What is your policy for school resource officers if ICE shows up at a school?
So that's, well, I guess
So,
a little bit of that.
Question was, what is our policy as it relates to our school resource officers if ICE shows up at the school? So the Clarke County School District has rules in place on how they deal with ICE. They don't release certain information. They also would advise that person to go to staff, and they would work that way. They wouldn't give any information. Our officers wouldn't be one way or the other. We're not going to turn around and say, okay, they're on school property dealing with the school. Our officers probably would not interfere in that at all. I don't see a place where they would, if that makes sense, outside of just standing by and being with the school staff. Our officers are there to protect the kids and address crime in schools, and that's it. So.
Okay, Beto, and then Dexter.
Okay,
And
so the question.
sorry, I just want to be clear. We're coming up on time, and we want to be super respectful of everybody's time. So we'll take Beto, we'll take President Joyner back there, and then one more after that. Okay.
Can we also, I want to invite everybody, I'm putting you on the spot here, to write down your questions. If you can find a piece of paper to write it on, or you can email it to ICPGA@gmail.com. We will get your questions to Chief and Sheriff, and if they are able, they can respond to those questions that we can then share out to the list. Thank you for doing that.
Yep.
I know you have a lot of important questions. We just don't have the time to get to them all in person.
So please make your questions as brief as possible.
Yeah.
So American community lives in the shadows and normally don't denounce it. Now with all these new legislations, the rhetoric, the narrative, and the pressure over cities, no? How that affect the trust in the work of the police? Because I believe that police need the trust of the community. They need to people open the door, answer questions about something happened in the neighborhood. How that put at risk the rest of the population, and if it's anything you guys been seeing in the community.
So my response to that is I believe in community outreach, and it's not exclusive. We don't exclude anybody. If you are in Clarke County, we want to reach out. We want you to be a part of this community. We want you to feel safe. So my deputies, we haven't scaled back on our events. We got our fall festival. We did that. We do haircut events. We want everybody from the community to know that is. We go out and do all these events, and we want people to know that they are welcome. We don't go out to a community center and start asking questions about, where you were born or none of that. That's not what we do. That's never been a part of law enforcement in this county. And I can speak a little bit because I spent, a dozen years at the police department too. So that's just not how we do business. I think we date back to, even before when Chief Lumpkin was chief. He's the one that told me about that, and I learned, and we've grown. So I can't just say, hey, Beto, trust everything. But I can tell you our folks are not instructed to do anything. We don't work for ICE to the extent that we have to follow the law and cooperate with them on certain things. But usually that at worst would be if they're here, they get into some trouble and they call us for help because somebody's fighting, we would go to try to help diffuse that situation. But beyond that, we are not federal agents. That's not what our focus is. It's about this community, and that will continue. And if you have issues and you want partnerships, please let us know, because if somebody is having fear, they can talk to me themselves. I'll come out and I'll talk to anybody and explain to them what the facts are, what reality is.
So to answer your question, I think probably one of my greatest concerns is the same thing, is that kind of go into the shadows, and then crimes are happening against the Hispanic community, and no one's reporting those crimes because they're scared of what we'll do. Again, the law is if we have probable cause to arrest that person, then we have to. And so it's important to put that message out there. We've done a lot of work to build relationships in this community, meaningful relationships, specifically with the Hispanic community. I'm proud to say that last year we've hired 37 officers, and 58% were minority applicants. Over the last 2 years, I've hired over 15 Hispanic officers. So that is, when someone looks like you and they're out in that community, I think it'll help to build those relationships. So we continue to do that, continue to work with the community, but really getting the facts out. And that's what we talked about today, is the fact is, unless you've committed a crime or there's probable cause, we're not checking people's status as a police department.
And this will have to be our last one, I think, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Thank you for being here. You talked about ICE, to your knowledge, only targeting those that have criminal records right now. In the event they showed up at my house of worship and did not have a search warrant for a particular person, what are my rights as far as not letting them on my property?
That is a great question, and I don't know the answer. I apologize. The church is private property, obviously, right? But if they come there and they have a criminal warrant, then I don't know how you can.
If they don't have a warrant. They don't know.
If they don't have a warrant, then you should ask for a warrant. You should seek legal advice and say you're not coming in until I see a warrant, or you have a reason, right? Now, churches, although private property, they're semi-public because we invite everybody in. So that's kind of a touchy lawyer question. I don't want to get into that one and mess that one up. So no, I'm not. I'll say get a legal advice on that one.
Yeah. In general, ask for a warrant. I don't think
Signed by a judge.
Yes.
a warrant signed by a judge. I think that's just a good benchmark to start. What I will say is it's never going to do you any good to try, just like we say, hey, on a traffic stop, that's not the time to try to adjudicate something. If you say, I didn't take it, follow the procedure, this is what you can do. You can record video, audio, whatever it takes, so that if something is not above board, you at least have that evidence at hand. Unfortunately, there are some things that if people kind of push the envelope, we're just not going to be able to stop. But start with that, know what the law is. But also, this is what I'm going to say. If you say you know the law, make sure you know the law. Because a lot of times, the first thing that I think when somebody says, I know my rights, is I'm about to hear something that's not their rights. At what point does an officer have to read you Miranda?
Custody plus interrogation.
Right. If we're not asking you a question, we don't have to read you anything. If I see you hit somebody and I say I'm taking you to jail for assault, I'm taking you to jail for assault. I don't have to read you Miranda. But people think because they see it on TV, you're going to get out of jail because, oh, they didn't read my Miranda. And they confess to all these crimes. All right, I'm going to tell you all this stuff, blah, 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 because you didn't read me. That's not the case. But before you start saying, I know my rights, I know the law, just know the law. And if you don't know, ask somebody who does.
So I think we are indeed out of time. Before we show our appreciation for these questions and really helpful answers and this time to connect, I wanted to follow on with your question. I recommend everybody check out the National Immigration Law Center. They have a fact sheet on how communities can be in relationship and respond to ICE. And specifically, there are items in there on houses of worship and what houses of worship can do, including clarifying that all of your rooms are private spaces. You can put up signage saying that each room is private. Obviously, your lobby is not a private space. It's hard to, call that private. But if a space is marked private, then a person has a reasonable expectation of being a private space for them to be, say they're an immigrant. And so law enforcement doesn't have the right to go in there. ICE doesn't have a right to go into a private space. That's your right as a private citizen or a private individual. So anyway, go check it out, nilc.org, helpful fact sheet. There are a lot of other helpful organizations out there. Right now, let's take a moment and just appreciate that Chief and Sheriff are here, have taken this time, have considered your questions, and that you are all here. We do not usually have meetings quite this size. And there is a lot going on in the wider community, and it's rainy and it's cold and it's a weekday and a lot of people couldn't be here. So what a blessing how much this community cares and shows up. So let us be grateful for that. Amen.
Yep, so I'll just speak up a little. Again, we thank you all. You could have been anywhere on this cold. Sorry. Thank you. You could have been anywhere on this cold, rainy day, but you all came out here to be here in person, and that just warms our hearts. We thank you for being so concerned about your community, so concerned about the world that we live in, that you said you got to get out and you got to find out what's going on and what our law enforcement partners are doing. We just want you to give another round of applause for Sheriff Dr. Williams.